Good afternoon and happy spring, everyone. I know for personally, I am extraordinarily happy to see the sun shining finally. In today's ACEware webinar, Chuck and Jason will be sharing the many instructor resources you have available with Student Manager and ACEweb. Chuck will lead the first half of the session, showing Student Manager's instructor module, and Jason will follow up to demonstrate what your instructors can do with ACEweb. I want you to notice today that there's a handout for you that you can access in your toolbar there. And this is a PowerPoint template we have made for you that you can use as part of your instructor orientation program when you decide to give them access to their courses through ACEweb. But if you're not able to grab that today, just drop me an email and I'll send it to you later. There's a lot of information to cover today, so let's get started. And as I turn things over to Chuck, I'll remind you that you can type any questions you have in the chat box and we'll get you a response as soon as we can. So Chuck, I'm turning things over to you.
And I'm paying attention, so here we go. So, well, welcome everybody, and again, just a warning, not a warning, but a good news. I think we thought this might take longer than 60 minutes. I think Jason and I, due to our excellent planning and coordination and Sharon's excellent slide set, we ought to be done closer to our normal hour. So hopefully that won't, that'll keep you on schedule or ahead of schedule. So we got two parts. Obviously, faculty are important parts of running a good CE program. And we like to think that Student Manager and ACEweb give you some excellent tools to make that happen. And, you know, certainly one of the big elements is you got to be able to have the data about the instructor that will help you keep in touch with them, manage them, select them in the right courses, and then certainly doing the tracking of where they go, which course are they doing, how much are we paying them. That's all the stuff that certainly Student Manager can do. And online, and you'll again hear from Jason on this, but if you allow your instructors to do that, you'll be able to do, let the instructors look at their courses, let them print their own rosters, print their attendance sheets, even email students, and record hours, grades, and credits. Submit course proposals, and I don't think it's mentioned here, but we'll talk about, I think Jason will, is that if you have the optional attendance tracking module, they can track attendance via ACEweb. So, without further ado, let us rock and roll on that. So again, what's the instructor record? Well, first of all, adding an instructor, presumably you've been there, done that. You can add an instructor from the main menu. You can add it from the faculty menu, or you can actually add a new instructor from the course screen itself. On the instructor record, if you're looking at it, you're familiar, you say it, well, it looks an awful lot like our name record, because there's a lot of fields on the instructor record that are similar to Student Manager. But the big thing to note is that, of course, instructors are stored in a separate database. You say, well, wait a minute, so if I have an instructor and they want to be a student, I got to re-enter them, or if I have a student who's now going to be a good instructor, we have to enter them again? Not necessarily, because we give you a set of tools to be able to clone a student based on the instructor record, which would be you have an instructor that looked around and said, hey, I want to take that course over here. Well, you can add them to the student table by clicking the student link. That'll give you a menu to options to either create a new record, or if that instructor is one, and I know Havlicek is in the darn student database because he's the one that says your hearing is bad, I'm going to go look his name up and link this instructor to that student record that I happen to know is in there. Ditto on the name side. If you've got Mike Lowry, who has been a good student forever, and he says, you know, I'm ready to teach a class, you have a set of tools from the special button that allows you to make an instructor record out of a name record. And that will automatically link up that student. I'm going to actually roll to Manager and get to the name record. And so the idea that if you have a student who happens to also be an instructor, and they have the records linked, you can jump between the student record and the instructor record. Instructor record, whoops, that was student record, instructor record, see the student record. And you can flip back and forth between the two records. So again, if you haven't been alert to that, that is a great tool to help you manage or do a better job of integrating your student table and your instructor table. So in addition to those fields that we talked about, there are fields about availability, fields about who the staff handler is, which if you wanted to monitor that, you could say, well, hey, this Havlicek guy, he's a pain in the butt. The only person we're going to deal with is to call Ted. Ted knows how to deal with him. Throw him a hunk of meat every now and again, and he's quiet. So again, that's up to you. You have the option to say whether an email is published on the web, and then if the instructor is active. So that active is kind of like the name active record in that if you want, if this instructor, Chuck's going to take 6 months off and sail around the Pacific, I wish you could deactivate him, so that name won't pop up in your available lists of instructors for assigning to classes. And then finally, don't forget that there is an instructor callback. And again, you guys have been paying attention so far. Raise your hand if you've ever used instructor callback. Raise your hand in your hand raiser thingamabobber there. But again, nobody's using it. But the idea here is, again, if you have an instructor that you want to follow up about teaching a class, and again, maybe in Chuck's case, he's going to be gone for 6 months, so you put in a callback 6 months from today to remind you that you want to call him back, welcome him back to the US of A, and say, hey, let's get to work and pay back those bills you ran up while you were gallivanting around the ocean. So that's that callback feature for instructors. Instructor comments. Several places for you to put the comments. Again, the exclamation point, you can make it a pop-up. The ability to put in special skills. And we're going to get back to this in another note, but one of the things about skills might be things like multilingual. Can they speak Spanish? Do they speak Chinese or Arabic or, whatever? If you've got populations of people that you need to have an instructor who is multilingual, put that kind of stuff in their skill set, and you can use that to search instructors later on down the road. Information about the biographical info that is either for the internal for catalog production in your exporting data for catalog, or put in information in the HTML area. So if you wanted to put in your a picture, you wanted to put in some links to the instructor's website, you can do that. And again, I'm going to run to get all the way over to ACEweb here, and I'll get to try ACEweb. Should have had this up here. But if we want to look, if you're putting in information about an instructor, and you can put in the instructor link, put in a photograph of that instructor. Hopefully your instructors are better looking than this one. But the idea is that give yourself some, the beauty of this particular tool is that once you have put together the description, once you have put together this link about the instructor, you never have to edit it again unless Chuck gets an honorary degree from Harvard or gets sentenced to 3 years for putting his finger into the church till here or something. Again, the point is, once you make that little bit of effort to put in information about your instructor, that data will be available on the web forever and ever, amen. And that, I think that really makes can be a big difference in improving the look and the appeal of your website. Instructor additional info. Couple of things about that there are 2 fields on the instructor record that you can store links to documents. So if you have a full resume, or if you have some reference document that you want to highlight for this instructor to just keep it handy, you can link to it using your document links. The other big thing to remember on additional info is that the first character field and the last numeric field, if you use quote pay type, quote pay rate, and fill those in, when you assign this instructor to a course, those pay types and pay rates will be automatically loaded into their preference area. So that if I add Chuck Havlicek again to this class, let's go find a different class. Osher Lifelong Learning. Let's say we're going to add Chuck to this class. Havlicek, where are you? Enter. And that didn't come in. Did I not have Chuck? I was Chuck. All right, let's add Chuck again. We'll add Chuck. Thanks for checking that or watching that. And there's Chuck. So the hourly rate, get on the right one, because when you have 2, you got to make sure you're pointing to the instructor that would be data would be displayed at the bottom. So again, thank you, Jason. So now my default is hourly. My default pay rate is 50. But if I'm a good guy and I say, well, for Ali, I do that gratis. So I would say none. And we'd put that rate to 0. And so again, you always have control over what the final instructor pay is when you're assigning them to classes. User-defined fields are under the preferences. This is under the preferences screen under the faculty area. This is where you're able to control, like names, course register, what data elements you have on the screen. We give you a couple of user editable data elements. If you're going to want faculty callback, you have to enable it. So you've got to go turn it on over here in the preferences screen. Down at the bottom here, you've got notes for the default instructor pay date, notes about labels you're going to put on your instructor evaluation fields. And the other thing to note is that there are some preference boxes on the instructor preference tab that determines the behavior of instructor cloning when you're cloning a class. So again, you'll note you have some options to turn features on and off, or to turn cloning issues on and off. I had a thought. I'm going to pause. Don't see any questions. We good, Sharon?
You're just fine.
We're good. Okay. Instructor UDFs, we talked about this a second ago earlier, but again, other than that character 1 and numeric 4 that have double purpose if you want to use them for that, all the other fields are ones that you certainly can enable and label, work with them however you want. And instructor CRM or contact manager records, under the other category, it has a record of any instructor contacts you've made. If you sent out email blast to them or printed mailing labels, if you have the CRM module, you'll see that there'll be log contacts that you made in that. I guess I did remember what I wanted to ask. I'll remember it in a little bit. Other area is that combining duplicate instructor records. And again, you guys, instructors, hopefully you kind of keep an eye on that. But if you do find you've got Charles Havlicek and Chuck Havlicek, like my database, you can do the copy the good ID over the bad ID, and it will then combine the 2 records. And so that's down at the bottom of your screen. It's called Faculty System ID. I know what I was going to ask, and that is, nobody raised their hand on the last. Let's see if I can get to hit this one. How many of you have a default pay type or a default pay rate set for any instructors? Anybody? Going once, going twice, and we have one. I have a winner. Ready to go. Ready to go. All right, Maxie, good. And again, if you always pay a different rate every time, then that certainly doesn't make any sense. But if generally you have an instructor who teaches in an area and 95% of the time they get 25 bucks an hour, go ahead and put in that H for hourly rate 25 bucks. And you won't have to remember to put it in when you are assigning that instructor to a class. Okay, good record, bad record, combining records. Mass changing faculty fields. And of course, I don't use the faculty side. I use Student Manager every day for contact tracking and for sales, but I don't get into faculty. But one of the things Matthew added was the ability to do mass changes of faculty data elements. And the big thing on this is probably things like if you wanted to mark all the faculty for a print label to a particular value, you can set that. If you were wanting to change the behavior of how an instructor views students' emails, you can do that. So again, and ACEweb access, for ACEweb access. Now, I was going to say, Jason, you with me? Are you going to talk about where you set those access levels in ACEweb on your side of the house for manager?
Oh, yes, most definitely.
Good, good. All right. Well, we'll let Jason wrap this up and go back to the details on how this affects ACEweb. Okay, we've got the instructor created, assigning them to a course. So from the course screen, you select the instructor tab, click the plus additional instructor, pick the instructor, lather, rinse, repeat. So again, you can have as many instructors tied into that course as you want. Just repeat those steps. To edit an instructor data from the name record, you can hit, again, you highlight the instructor. You highlight the instructor that you want to edit if you have more than one, hit the edit instructor record, and that will take you to that instructor record. So this is that reminder, you got to click on their specific one. If you accidentally added an instructor or put an instructor on a course and now they're not going to teach it, remove them by just highlighting that instructor name and hitting remove instructor. So that's pretty straightforward. A couple of other things about instructors that are some special features. One is subject scoping. And again, I'm going to ask, has anybody used subject scoping? Going once, going twice, and the answer is no. Okay, what this allows you to do is basically put a link between the subject code of a course and the interest codes that are assigned to instructors. And so in Student Manager, what you have is that you have interest codes on instructors, okay? You can have as many as you want. In courses, you have a subject code. If you turn on the subject code scoping feature, edit preferences, course, subject scoping, and you'll note it is a black preference, which means that that can be set at a user by user preference. So I've turned this on for myself. Now when I have that turned on and I'm setting at a course, Baking with Craft Beer, that has a subject code health, when I go to instructors and do add additional instructor, I'm only going to see those instructors that have an interest code of health. So let's prove it. You pick Jeannie Summers, We click on a record, we do edit instructor record, and look at that. They are one of 2 instructors who have a category of health. You say, well, that's all fine and good. I know all my instructors, they know what to do. That's fine. If you have a larger program, or you have people who may not know skill sets of every instructor in your 1,700 instructor database, that's an area that I would certainly encourage you to think about. But again, you can add any number of interest codes to the instructor record. And again, with the scoping turned on, you're going to only see those instructors in that list that match up with that particular subject code. All right, I'll quit beating on that. How about this? You're looking for the perfect instructor. He has to have, jumps tall buildings in a single bound, faster than a speeding locomotive, et cetera, et cetera. And we've got a tool for you. It's called Talent Search, the F3 key from the Manager's Special Tools menu. Now, when you're looking up instructors from this, you pretty much have the standard instructor, last name, first name, firm, yada, yada. You say that, okay, now I also did something that I pay attention. You can add a new instructor on the fly by hitting escape out of the lookup course mode. I'm going to abandon this because I don't want that. Which, by the way, and this is a caveat, back before about, a year or so ago, if you hit add an instructor on the fly, I hit escape now, and you did abandon here, it would save a blank instructor record. And so if you were looking at faculty, you might have lots of blank records in here. If you have that, let me know, and I'll give you a little script to clean that up. There is no reason to have you have those duplicates on here. We were talking about finding the perfect instructor, and he said there's a function key for that. And we have instructor locator, F3. Well, I like to call it talent search, so we're going to do F3. Talent search, instructor locator. What this allows you to do is say, I want to find every instructor ahead of time. You might be considering, do I want to start doing scoping? Well, have I assigned subject codes to instructors? So if I were to pick ACEware, how many people would I have? Half a dozen. If I were to pick computer. How many instructors? Ooh, only 1. So presumably I'm not exactly, I don't really have that set up right to, I need to cancel out of that. What am I doing? There we go. Ignore out of this. Let's try that again. I wanted to clear that. So, but the beauty of it is that if you put in some of the supplemental data, you put in notes in the skills area, you put in notes in the comments, you put in notes in the bio, it allows you to do some wildcard searching. So if I wanted to say, I want somebody who knows Spanish, I'm going to look for that for the skills and the keyword, and the answer is, none. Well, what if I said sheep shearing? Sheep shearing, and I put that up. Well, let's try shearing here. I'm running out of examples. Shearing, we hit the OK button. There is one. So we've got Chuck Havlicek, and one of his skills is sheep shearing. Trust me, I'm no longer active, so don't go. If you have sheep at home, don't call me. We're good on that. But the point is, this little instructor search tool, again, if you put the data in the Student Manager faculty record, you're able to go in and do a connection and do some searching on your instructors. Okay, we're getting close to my time to pass things over.
We do have a question here you might want to address.
Fire away.
In the course record, if you have an instructor that's listed twice, and this is for payroll purposes, is there a way to only show that instructor once on ACEweb?
And that's an excellent question for Jason. Do you want to deal with that now, or do you want to think about it and respond to it when you're in ACEweb?
I would have to do some thinking on that because I believe it would require a bit of custom coding on the template.
Yeah, I see. The question is, if you use that because you're paying them in 2 installments, how you eliminate that. So it sounds like, Maxie, we're going to need to do some research on that and get back to you. So faculty reporting, and again, faculty contracts generated from the course screen, quick reports, or from reports faculty. And again, there are lots of different ways that you can generate contracts. I'm going to, again, I'm hoping for more hits on this. Raise your hand if you do any kind of faculty contracts or confirmation letters out of Student Manager. Raise your hand. I'm trying to get some folks. All right, we've got a couple here that do that. But again, if you're having maybe your contract has to be done by the state, but maybe confirmation letters, those all can be done out of the faculty reports area. Multiple instructor lists, 1099 for pay, although that's typically done by your HR group. Performance data, which instructors are generating enrollments. Faculty only reports if you're just looking at, you know, I want a list of faculty members and I'm not worried about what courses they or what courses they're teaching. So again, a lot of them in there. One of the things I don't want you to forget is that under statistics course data summary, you can go in and do course statistics by instructor. And I'm going to actually show that real quick with, so if we're going to go statistics, course data summary, we're going to pick the field instructor, and we're going to say, I want to know for last year, how many courses did each instructor teach? And kind of what was their results. So by putting in the instructor as your variable, it'll tell you the classes they taught, how many were canceled. Look at my instructors, they are good. How many registrations, the average enrollment, yada, yada, and their net income. So again, it's a way for you to analyze those instructors. All right, I'm going to pause. I'm 2:30. I am on the money here. Any quick questions on Manager before we turn this over to Jason and he tells you the rest of the story? I don't see any. Sharon, I think we're ready to pass the baton.
Okay, I'm going to hand things over to Jason, and he'll show you the side of ACEweb where if you give your instructors access to that, there's a lot of things they can do on their own. Jason, on to you.
All right, thank you very much. Are you seeing my screen now? I'm not sure if I hit that button.
Yes.
I think so.
Good.
Awesome. Okay, yes, so as Chuck mentioned, this is going to be the ACEweb side of things, the instructional webinar on instructing your instructors to better instruct their students. We're going to try and break a record as we can say instructor in this webinar. So a quick overview of our agenda. Chuck mentioned this in the beginning, but we'll kind of recap. Having instructor access on ACEweb is going to allow your instructors to view the course information that you get to choose. You're going to have them be able to view and print course and workshop rosters, print attendance sheets, be able to email students and email their whole class or email individual students. If you have the attendance tracking module, you can actually have them record session attendance right from the browser, and also record hours or edit hours, credits, and grades, and also the ability to submit course proposals. So if they think they have a good idea for a course, they can submit that online and you'll get a notification about it. All right, so starting out, how do you enable an instructor to have instructor access? Well, there are two main things. First, the instructor has to be marked as active, and then you have to set an ACEweb access level on their instructor screen that is a value from 1 to 5 for a normal instructor. 0 disables the access, 1 gives them a view only of just the course information that they're teaching. Level 2 gives them the ability to view and print rosters. And then 3, 4, and 5 expand that to be able to view the hours, grades, and credits. So once you've enabled an instructor, also I should mention, to email students from their instructor login, you will have to have that view student email box checked on their record. Now for logging on, so what is the methods that they use to actually log into their instructor page? Their user ID or their logon ID is going to be this top ID number on their instructor record. Chuck had mentioned using this faculty system ID when doing things like combining 2 instructor records to eliminate duplicates. For the purposes of logging into ACEweb, this is the ID number that you want to use. The password, if they've never logged in as an instructor before and set their password, they have the ability to use the public password, which is their initials, and then the first 5 digits of their zip code. So in our example here for Chuck Havlicek at 66502 zip code, it would be CH66502. Now, I will mention that you can change this ID number here, but be very hesitant to change it to something easy for them to remember, like their email address. Because if you also allow the public password for your students, and the students are familiar with that, where they know they can go online and put in their email address and initials and zip code, and then get access to that account, they may be able to figure out that, hey, I can click this, instructor login button here, put in my instructor's login, and then just guess his zip code, and then possibly have the ability to be editing their grades and credits and things. So I would definitely keep this as either the system generated ID or some type of a unique number that wouldn't be available to students. Now, another note on the password, the main difference between this public password and the public password for students is that this one does not force you to create a password when you use it. So it's not truly a one-time or a temporary password. They do get a message that states you're using your default password to log in. We recommend that you change it, but it will not force them to actually change it. So when you're giving your instructors the tutorial on this, you might want to make it clear that you do expect them to create a unique password. Okay, so where do they go to actually log into this instructor page? If you're using our default templates and you've got just a fairly recent home.htm, then there should be a section for instructors that say access your rosters and course information, and that will basically be a link to instructor.awp. So if you're not using our home.htm or you want to create a separate link somewhere else, all you have to do is use your ACEweb URL and everything after the last slash, just erase that and put instructor.awp, and it will take you to this logon page. So once they click that link, they'll be taken to a screen that's the login screen where they put in their ID and password, and then they have a few filters here that they can set to start out. So including asynchronous courses, this is unchecked by default. You probably don't need to have your instructors viewing the rosters and things for membership courses or donations and things. So usually that's going to stay unchecked. And then the include courses taught in the past and gradebook, we're going to cover these in a lot more detail. So basically what happens after they click that link is they get taken to this page right here, which is the default. These are the classes I'm teaching that match the criteria that I had selected. And we're going to talk about a lot of the different things on this page, and it's kind of going to jump around a little bit. So we're going to start with viewing the actual roster. If they want to see the students that are enrolled in that course, they just simply click the list button for the course in question, and that's going to take them to this page. It gives them a preview of the course roster, lists the students. The fields that show up here are customizable. Again, we are going to talk about that, but for now we'll focus on what they're going to see on this first main page when they click on one of their courses. So you'll see if you've got the latest templates and you're using the just the standard ACEweb RWD design, you'll see these tabs across the top. On the rosters tab is what you're going to see here in our example, you've also got the course details tab, and that's going to be the one where they can see information about the course that typically a student wouldn't be able to see. Enrollment information, fee information, things like that. In fact, I think because we don't have an example slide of that, I'm going to see if we can pull something up here. Oops. So again, I'm clicking that list button. Oh, and this instructor doesn't have access to do that. Let's try this. Actually, let's try this. Get the right instructor selected here. And then I'm going to click, I don't want a membership course, donation. I must have had that checked. Okay, beginning yoga. So if I click the course details tab, you can see it's got extra course information that you wouldn't be able to get from just the standard course status page if you were a student and viewing the course. It's going to show you extra information, number of sessions, what the minimum and maximum enrollments are, who's the coordinator on the course, and then if you've got course notes set in Student Manager, those will show here as well. Okay, so back to our slide here. So that's our course details tab. The next tab is the tools tab, and this is the one that gives them the option to actually print the roster. Gives them the option to save it as an Excel file. It gives them the option to print the attendance sheet. And then this is the place where they can actually email the students as well. And again, we're going to talk about all these in more detail. This is just kind of an overview for right now. So again, if they click that course roster list button, they're going to see the fields that you have set in the roster fields INI setting. This is set in your ACEweb INI, and it controls which columns show up in the course roster for the instructor view. So you can see in our example, we had name, phone, and email, and those were the 3 columns that showed up here for this roster. A little later on, we're going to talk about how you can customize those. In terms of emailing, if they want to email just one student, then they just click on that student's email link from the roster preview. If they want to email all the students, then they would click the email all students link. Now, an important thing to note here is that ACEweb is not sending this email. This isn't anything like if you were to send a mass email in Student Manager. This relies, excuse me, this relies on the instructor having an email client on the computer that they're using that will fire up when they click on this mail to link. Depending on if they're using Outlook or a different client, they may need to click the Outlook users because that's going to put semicolons in between the addresses as opposed to commas. Now, by default, it's always going to use the blind carbon copy so that you're not sending a huge email to all the students that contains all the other students' email addresses. Another note on emailing, if you've got really, really large classes, sometimes your email client isn't going to like, trying to send an email to 200 different people. So it will break it into smaller chunks, and then you can email those groups separately, which is kind of a handy thing if you're, like I say, if you've got those really large class sizes. Now, if your email client just doesn't like this, or it doesn't give you the option to start up a new email when you click these links, you can always right-click the link and copy it. And what that will do is allow you to just paste that into whatever email client you're using, or just paste it into Notepad so you can get the list of emails and then stick those into whatever email program that they want to use. So there is still a way that they can do that if the links aren't actually functioning. All right, on that same Tools tab, they have the Attendance Sheets button. That will take them to a quick preview of the attendance sheet. Now, this is going to be limited by the number of sessions that that course has. If the course has a whole lot of sessions, then it's probably going to go off the side of the page and not print very well. If it's pretty close, then you can try switching your browser to print in landscape mode, and that might allow you to get those extra few session frames in. Otherwise, we'd recommend just saving it as an Excel worksheet, in which case you'll get a lot more options to break it into different pages and things like that. For gradebooks, and we're going to talk more about gradebooks once we get to super instructors, but if the gradebook feature is activated for a particular instructor and that instructor's access level permits them to edit the grades, then they'll see a separate section underneath the list of all the courses that they're teaching. So it's not going to be a button that's on the same line as the list and the track attendance buttons. It's a completely separate section below those courses where they can access their gradebook. So they simply click that button and are taken to the roster of students, and depending on, again, your access levels that you have specified, they'll be able to see or edit those grades, hours, and credits. They make their changes, they click Save Changes and Close Form, and that's as simple as that. So if you have staff that is spending a lot of time getting emails and spreadsheets or hand-ins from instructors and then having to go into Manager and manually enter these in, if you feel your instructors are competent enough to do this themselves, then think about enabling instructor access and gradebook access and having them take some of that workload off of your shoulders. So how do you set up the gradebook access? We mentioned the ACEweb access level on the instructor record. That 1 through 5 pertains to if the instructor can even view the hours, grades, and credits. To enable them to be able to edit the hours, grades, and credits is set on a course-by-course basis. You actually have to go to the course and check the web gradebook access level and make sure that that is set to an appropriate level that the instructor can edit those hours, grades, or credits. Now you can have an instructor with an access level of 5 so that they can view the hours, grades, and credits, but then maybe set their gradebook access level to a 3 so that they can only edit the hours but still view the grades and credits. So it gives you a lot of flexibility in how they can do that. So if your instructor is teaching a workshop type course, the screen that they're going to see when they click on that list button is a little bit different. There will be a drop-down box that allows them to select a workshop from the course. They pick the workshop and they click Show Roster for the above workshop, and then they're taken to a screen that has just the students enrolled in that one workshop. So kind of a handy feature if you need to see or print just a particular session from a course. One of the links on the instructor page right when they log in, I'm going to show you here. Let's go back. Up at the top, you see this Submit Course Proposal. So a course proposal is going to be a way for your instructors to submit what they think is maybe a good idea for a new course that they'd like to teach. Gives them the ability to specify all of those different things that you would normally be setting up in a catalog code, such as your benefits, if there's prerequisite courses, materials, things like that. They can propose maybe a schedule of when they'd like to start, how many sessions it is, the times, and then extra demographic information on the instructor that they would teach you. That could either be them or could be, a different instructor. So what this does, back to our slideshow here, so they fill in the information, fill in the instructor information. When they click Submit Proposal, it's going to create a new type of record in your catalog table. The instructor is going to receive a confirmation email with all the information that they entered, and then whoever is listed in your office email staff I&I setting, the same person that gets registration confirmation notifications, they're going to get an email that an instructor has submitted a course proposal. So what happens after that? It creates that record in Student Manager in your catalog table. And to view those, you just go up to Module, Catalog, and Course Proposals. You'll be taken to this screen. It's going to show whichever the last one that was submitted by default, but you can easily just click Find and search for the one that they submitted. You can review all the information, change it if necessary. If you click approve, then that changes this from a proposal to an actual catalog record. So the same type that you use on all of your other courses. From that point, you can click the create course button and create a course right from that proposal that was submitted. So if they're doing a great job recommending courses, then again, this is another way that you can save time by not having to type in all this information or get it from different sources. If they can put in most of the work for you, then so be it, let them do it. Now there's another link that is typically just on the home page, and that is teaching.awp. Now this doesn't create anything in the database. All this does is send a notification to the office email staff that somebody is interested in teaching, and it copies this information that they enter and gives you the ability to reach out to them and see if they want to teach course. And at that point, you would create them a normal instructor record. All right, so now we're getting into our super instructor section. And there's going to be a lot to cover here. We're going to try and jump through as quick as we can. What is a super instructor? They don't have to be assigned as an instructor to courses to be able to log in with instructor access and do some of those things that normal instructors with instructor access can do. You get to control what access they have. Excuse me. The instructors search for the courses that they want to view. So this gives them the ability to kind of query the database, and you get the ability to filter what they can see with a couple of really cool options that we're going to talk about. One of those being the super limit, instructor super limit. All right, so let's take a look. Now, a lot of this is going to be very similar to a normal instructor. So how do we enable a super instructor? First, they have to be active. The access level has to be set with a value between 6 and 9. So a normal instructor is 1 through 5. A super instructor is 6 through 9. And that basically just 6 enable super instructor, and then 7, 8, and 9 is the same for 5, 6, or 2, 3, and 4 for a normal instructor, or maybe it's 3, 4, 5. Anyway, gives them the ability to view either the hours and grades, or hours, grades, and credits for your instructors. And just the same as with normal instructors as well, if you want them to be able to view the emails and use the email links, you have to have that view student email checked. The logon process for a super instructor is pretty much exactly the same. It uses that same top ID number and the same public password. Again, even more important with a super instructor because they potentially have access to even more courses than just one instructor would have. You want to make sure that they are changing that password and creating a nice, safe, and secure one. Okay, so once a super instructor logs in, this is going to be the first page that they see. Now, the main difference is that it doesn't default them to the list of courses that they're teaching, because again, a super instructor doesn't necessarily have to be on a course. Now, they can be an instructor on a course, but it's not required. So it doesn't show you any course lists right off the bat. So a few options that we're going to talk about here. The filters that they have are to show current and upcoming courses, include the asynchronous courses. We talked about that. Typically, you're going to have that just unchecked. You don't want to see membership donation courses. Include courses taught in the past. Now, there's a couple different ways, and I think it's a few slides ahead, but we're going to talk more about current and upcoming and courses taught in the past because you can tweak these quite a bit. So we'll save that for just a couple of slides here. If they want to see the gradebook links, again, they have to check that gradebook one. And then the final option there, show selected courses for all instructors. What this basically means is if you uncheck that, then it's only going to be showing the courses that they are an instructor on. If you have it checked, then they'll see their courses as well as everybody else's that match whatever filters they select. So if we look at an example query here, the super instructor is searching in the course name that starts with Mastering Student Manager. And for the results, it pulls up all of the courses that matches the filters they had checked, as well as the course name beginning with Mastering Student Manager. Okay, And here's, I guess, a good example of how the gradebook section shows below the normal course listing section. So again, it's not going to be on the actual course list up top. It's a completely separate section. And depending on how many courses are queried in your list, that may be way, way down the page. And that, I think I wanted to mention that if you were to not choose a query, so you don't choose a course name starts with blah, 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 and you just hit get courses, it will query the entire database for the other checkboxes that you have matched. Now that can take a big strain on your ACEweb server. If you have a lot of courses, especially if you don't deactivate old courses and things like that, this could tie up ACEweb for a very long time, and results can be pretty unpredictable when you're doing a really big query like that. So keep that in mind. It's best to filter by just what they're looking for. And it does give you a number of options. It's not just course name, but if we, let's see, my super instructor, go back, oh, there it was. So you've got course title, the course code, which means you could do course code starts with, 19 fall. You can do by the begin date, by a coordinator, department, so on and so forth. And we're also going to talk about, and I think that's coming up next, going to talk about another way that you can limit those. So let's see, we've talked about query, the results. Yes, limiting super instructors. Now, most of you hopefully are on or much past this version of Student Manager and ACEweb, but you do need to have those versions. What you can do to limit the courses a super instructor can query on is to set the super instructor limit. So that's this checkbox right here on the instructor record, limit super instruct. You check that box, and then you enter in the subject codes, and Chuck talked a lot about this, where you can do your talent searches and things. The same thing applies, is you can add the subject codes that you want that instructor to be limited to when they're doing their query on the super instructor access page. Now, it's important to note, if you have limit super instructor checked and you don't have any subject codes in there, then they are not going to be able to see any courses whatsoever. They'll basically get a message kind of like at the bottom here that says, none of the courses that you're authorized to view match your search request. So it's important to specify those subject codes. And again, here's an example on our course page where that subject code is stored. Okay, so now we're going to get into customizing the actual course listings. So if you want to change which columns show up in the first page that a normal instructor would see, then what you're going to have to do is actually edit a template. We're going to have an example here, and that template is instructor.htm. Down here at the very bottom of the page, we have a course field setting flag here. Everything in between this is what controls which columns show up on that course listing. Now, this whole big section here is basically just putting in a link to the course status page, so that if they want to just view what the student would view, they can click that and get a link to that course status page. But you can see everything after that. So that's the course. We have enrolled, waiting, limit, begins, ends, course time, and meets. And so that is what controls those fields that show up there. There was something else I was going to mention, and it has escaped me, but I'm sure it's going to come back. So, okay. Now that is a global setting. So when you change that on the template, it changes it for all of your instructors, normal or super. It's a global thing, so it can't be done on a course-by-course basis for that particular option. Now, I did mention that we were going to talk about the current versus past, and there's kind of two different ways. The default is that when you have the current and upcoming checked, that means active courses are going to be included, and inactive courses are going to be in the courses taught in the past checkbox. So if your organization is very good about keeping up with deactivating courses that have taken place, then the default should work fine. If you leave courses active for a really long time, you might want to change this to this other option, which is to use end date. What that's going to do instead is when you have the use or the show courses taught in the past checked, it's going to use the end date of the course as the flag for is this in the past or not. Now you can further modify that use end date to kind of give it a list flag, which is similar to the web lag on the ACEweb info tab of a course. This one again is set on that instructor.htm template, in that same config section. You have the use end date, you would set this to on, and then list lag would control how long those courses actually stay in the active or the past or that past filter. So if you use a positive number for list lag, that's going to leave those courses still in that past section for a number of days after the course has ended. If it's a negative number, then it's going to stay in the current section for that many days. If you use a negative number, then it's moved into that past courses section that many days prior to the course end date. Okay, viewing wait lists. Now, by default, if a course has a student that is on the wait list, then they're going to see this when they bring up the roster. It's going to be a separate section down in the bottom. You can customize those fields as well. This would be on your class roster.htm template. Again, at the very bottom here, you have a wait fields section. So if you want to add in something like the time that a person added themselves to the wait list, because again, this is a first come, first serve thing, then you can add this to the wait field section. And that's going to give you the ability to see, well, this person added themselves onto the wait list 2 hours before that person did, so on and so forth. So it gives you the ability to customize that.
Jason, along the lines of customizing some of the lag days and things, we have a question. Is there a way to let instructors view the course only a few days before the class? Can you customize when they can actually access the class and view those things? So I don't want my instructor to see anything until 5 days before the class, for example. Is there a way to do that?
Ooh, that's a tricky one. So you want them to globally have these settings to be able to view the courses and maybe access the rosters, gradebooks, and things, but you want to disable access for particular courses until a certain point is reached. I'd have to think on that. Off the top of my head, I want to say there's probably a way that you could do that. Chuck had mentioned a tool. Let's see, mass update. See, this is going to mass change like an ACEweb access
I'm going to
level.
jump in here. I'm kind of curious as to why you would do that if there's no overhead involved for you allowing instructors to see that, unless you think they're going to get anxious if they look at an early list and there's only 3 and then they're beating on your shoulders about that. But yeah, there's this mass enable disable, which you can turn on. It's just as Jason's showing, you'd have to do that every week or so to say only show courses that are coming up in the next 5 days, which you could do. That would mass turn it on and off. But again, I'd kind of be curious as to what your functional or what's your operational reasons for doing that, and we can talk about that offline sometime. So.
Yep.
All right, carry on.
Okay, so we are on viewing waitlists. So we looked at the class roster.htm template where you can customize those fields to show up for your waitlisted courses. On the same note, customizing the actual roster. So this is the big one here. There's 2 main methods for customizing the columns that show up when an instructor clicks that list button on a course. So by default, it's set to something like the name, address, phone, email. If they have the view email checked, that email column will show up. And then I think it's just name, address, phone, and email. So what if we wanted to add more courses? So option 1 is to add additional fields to the default, which is set in your roster field setting in your ACEweb INI. So what we would do is actually go to the course. Yeah, I've got go to the course and go to our ACEweb info tab. And then in the bottom right here, you have the configuration settings for ACEweb special functions. If you include this section here called roster fields, and you specify roster fields to start, rather :roster fields, then this is going to say, well, I automatically want to pull in whatever is specified in my roster fields INI setting, but then I also want to add these things to it. Now note, this is on a course-by-course basis. We're adding this to this one particular course. So if we go to 17W Acme, let's just 17WA, refresh my list. Let's find out who's teaching this. Maybe a past course. Nope, definitely wasn't Chuck teaching it. So we'll go back to the super instructor, and then inactive. Here we go. Okay, so if I click the list button on this course, you can see it has gone beyond the default roster fields, which was just name, address, and phone, and email, but it's including what we've specified in that special section on the ACEweb info tab. So maybe I want to see the t-shirt size or the tracking code. Any fields that you add in there are going to show up on the roster. Now, inversely to that, if you don't want to just add fields to the existing default, but you want to specify a particular set, then you just replace that :roster fields with whatever fields you want to use. So if you want to completely redo it and not just add to it, just get rid of that roster fields on that ACEweb info tab. So you would just do something like this. And that's only going to show those fields that you have specified there. Okay, so, and yeah, that's just a example showing where that is. Any questions so far? Still doing good?
You're doing fine.
All right, so our final notes. A lot of these things are going to require that you have the latest templates. These templates may not be ones that were included with all of the ACEweb updates. So if you find yourself looking for a template and you don't have it, or yours looks completely different, just get with your technician and we can figure out if it's a template thing or a configuration thing. Also, some of the things that require setup in Student Manager. If you don't have access or your Student Manager account doesn't have access to certain areas, you may not be able to edit some of these settings, so you'd want to get with your Student Manager administrator to make sure you do have the appropriate level set for that. And on the final note, a lot of these, if you want to really tweak some of those settings, again, they were changes that we made on templates. So if your template manager routine through ACEweb is locked down and you don't have access to the actual template files on the server, you may need to involve your IT to get you access to make some of those changes there. As always, if you get stuck anywhere, just get a hold of your technician and we're always happy to help. So, all right, Sharon.
Very good. You two did an excellent job of keeping things on time. And so what we're showing you here is just kind of what's next. We have our software update webinar early in April. Our April users webinar will be all about being keeper of the flame. So I expect a full session there of everybody, what is my role as keeper of the flame? And I'm encouraging all of you to get your conference registration in. We've got a great group of registrations in already, and there's just a few more days remaining to get that early fee. And with your support agreement, with your scholarship, that even gets that price even better. So hope to see your registration in the next few days. So I hope that you have accessed your instructor PowerPoint deck. If not, drop me an email and I'll send that to you. Chuck, Jason, anything else to say for the good of the cause before we let folks get back to work this afternoon?
I think I've said enough.
Yes. All right. Well, you all have a great rest of your day and a good weekend, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks for the software update. Bye now.